The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience presented by Underdog. It's time to dig in to the research for the Players Championship from Sawgrass. Starts on Thursday, the best field of the year so far. 144 players are gonna be just outside of Jacksonville, and we're not gonna get every single big name. Obviously, the LIV players are not playing in the PGA Tour's flagship event, so cross those guys off the list. Tiger Woods isn't playing either. We still have not seen Tiger in competitive play outside of TGL so far in 2025. My guy Joe Adone was at TGL last week, asked Tiger at the podium whether or not he was going to be teeing it up at Sawgrass, and he said no. Not going to be doing that. And he's officially withdrawn from the field as well. No Ernie Els this time around. No Todd Father. Brennan Todd is also not playing. Kevin Streelman, I don't think he was in the field anyway, but now he's out with a knee injury. And Alex Noren, as it turns out, tore his glute and hamstring before the century. That's why he remains on the sideline. So he is not going to be in the field this week either. But overall, it's the strongest field by far of the season. One of the strongest that we're going to see all year anyway. When you add in the LIV guys, outside of the Masters, I suppose, and the Open has some like janky guys in it as well. So behind basically the PGA Championship, the Players is probably second or third in overall field of strength quality once you start going down the list. And I really have developed a love relationship with the Players over the years. I used to really hate the Players because Sawgrass is such a gimmicky course, and we'll see that when we do the overview and talk about the skills and implosions that can happen when you have 17 holes that feature water on them. But I do like that they've really built this up into, they call it the fifth major. It's not, you can't be the fifth major when there's only four majors. I mean, I have a preference for the 42nd major, the Corrales Punta Cana Championship. Like, this is a course, weirdly enough, that doesn't feel like it should have that elevated status of being the fifth biggest tournament. That's probably the way to put it. It's the fifth biggest tournament of the year because, honest to God, the fifth major is probably what we saw this week at Bay Hill. Like, that's a major championship course. It's not, I mean, it is a course where you can go ejecto seat. Look at some of those names that did not make the cut this week that shot 80 in the second round or first round or whatever it is. But that feels, in my mind, like a major championship track. Sawgrass just doesn't feel that way. It feels like a made-for-TV product. However, that's exactly what it is. And we're going to get some great coverage this week. If you have ESPN Plus, or if you don't have ESPN Plus, they're not even plugging this show. But if you do have that ability, you'll be able to follow the players of every single hole. Whoever you want to watch, you're going to be able to get eyes in the sky on it. And we're going to be doing that for the Cut Sweats live show Friday afternoon on Mayo Media Network. If you were not subbed to Mayo Media Network, I suggest you do that now, because not only will you be able to stream that show live, along with all of the other great content that's already come out, including the first look at the players with myself, Cam Stewart, and Ian McMillan that came out on Friday on the audio and video feeds right now. I'm doing two giveaways this week. $500 cash to one of you and a free year at Fantasy National for someone else. All you got to do to get in those draws, sub to Mayo Media Network. And in the comment section right now, you tell me the best, it's probably not the best bet, but the player you think has the best chance to win from 100 to 1 and beyond. Who are one of these guys from the back end of the field at the Players who you think can win that are above 100 to 1 right now? You do that, you get in the draw. The other ways to get into the draw, to give yourself more ballots, so you sub, you smash the like, you leave that comment, or subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. You subscribe to it, you turn on those auto downloads, and you rate it 5 stars. It's the same thing. In that comment section, you give me your favorite winner from beyond 100 to 1. You do those 3 things, you get 3 ballots into the draw. Highly recommend that you go do that. All right? One of the other big things about the Players that I have, besides the coverage that I enjoy, and if you have a Fantasy National membership, go to the top of the screen. Hell, I'll bring it up right now for you if you can see it on the screen. Oh, that's the grid. If we go right here on the screen, the members exclusive, that gives you the leaderboard app, and it will work perfectly in conjunction with what you have been seeing on the screen. In fact, it'll probably be ahead of the coverage a lot of the times, and that is the best feature right now of Fantasy National, plus all the stats, all the tools. You'll see me do all the research with it. But since this tournament has moved to March, it's a good table setter for the entire year for major season. When you take a look that it was played in mid-May, it's where the PGA Championship slot is now, and that moved from August up into May, hence why they had to move this from from May up into March. Everyone who has won in those years since, starting with Rory in 2019, is a major champion. Scotty became the first ever player to win the Players back-to-back seasons a year ago. Maybe he'll go for the three-peat again this year. Who knows? But Cam Smith, Justin Thomas, Rory McIlroy are all on that list. Obviously, there was no tournament in 2020. But if you're like Cust and you want to give a special shout-out to Hideki, who was leading when play concluded, which didn't even finish the first round, he too is a major champion. So normally we would see these not necessarily out of nowhere winners, but guys from more down the board. And we've seen those guys compete year over year, although Scotty's been nails the past few years coming down the stretch. I know he won by a stroke a year ago, but he stormed the castle in the final day, came back. When he was on 4, spun it back into the hole, it was curtains for everyone else, even though he was still chasing at that point. But it's been very high-quality winners. That's not to say that everyone at the top of the board is going to have a good week, because this is the Players' Championship. One bad shot leads to a triple bogey, and you're absolutely finished for the week. Just if it happens on Thursday or Friday, you're probably going to miss the cut. And I'll have more of that in-depth research in terms of DraftKings pricing, points, ownership, historical, and how many of these guys actually make the cut in terms of roster construction. Not only will I talk that through with Tambo live at 9 a.m. Eastern Time Wednesday morning, where you can come and ask your questions, but in the first newsletter post, and I'll have that article posted on X as well, pinned to the top of my profile, that coverage is going to be there. It doesn't make for a very exciting show, me just reading percentages and numbers. So you can read that one if you want to dig in a little bit more. Shout out to Skylar Hoke for the historic database of all of these ownerships, because he tweets it out every single week and is the host of the European Tour Picks and Bet Show. And I think that he and Tom will be covering the Players' Championship from the European player angle this week. And there's one European player in particular that I find really fascinating this week. Laurie Cantor is in the field. He has a first, second, and third on the DP World Tour so far this season. He has inched his way up to number 42 in the world. Everyone who's inside the top 50 gets themselves into the Players' Championship. It's not abnormal to see Laurie Cantor doing so well. He's a good player. And him beating up on weaker DP fields actually makes a ton of sense. And he's elevated himself to the spot. The interesting part about him was he went to LIV the first year of LIV. And then he was a reserve player on LIV the second year, and then he went back to the DP World Tour. And now he is in this field. A former full-time LIV player, then a reserve player on LIV, is playing in the PGA Tour flagship event. It might be an absolute nothing burger, but we know that potentially, I mean, it's very secretive, but some of these contracts on LIV are coming up very, very soon. So does this pave the way to say, hey, if Brooks doesn't re-up with LIV and rejoins the PGA Tour, hell, has to join the DP World Tour as penance for going to LIV in the first place, does that mean he can now just play in any PGA Tour event that he actually qualifies for? That would be very interesting, because this does set a really weird precedent. I know that Cantor was never a full-time PGA Tour member, so maybe that's the wiggle room, and so it wouldn't set a precedent. It's not like he gave up his PGA Tour card to go play on LIV. He gave up his DP World Tour card to go play on LIV, and then he got it back, and now he's gangbusters over in Europe. But he is going to be in the field this week, so I want to see if there's any fallout from that. That's one of the very intriguing storylines that I really like this week. But enough about the field. Let's jump into the course. TPC Sawgrass. 7,352 yards in 2025 for Sawgrass. That's 75 yards longer than 2024. Remains a par 72. It is listed as Tiff Eagle Bermuda Grass / the Poa Trivalis Overseed, which is what we should expect. So expect putting surfaces very akin to what we've seen at the TPC Scottsdale over the years, because the Bermuda has not yet come in full. At least to my knowledge, it has not come yet in full. 92 bunkers, 17 holes with water in play. The greens are on the smaller side, 5,500 square feet. The average fairway width around 28 yards. There are a few changes for 2025. There's a new tournament tee on number 2 that added 15 yards to the hole. They've reestablished the iconic tree on number 6 while adding 15 yards to that hole. The original tree was lost in a hurricane in 2014. There's new tee complex on number 11 that added about 15 yards to the hole, and there's now stronger, deeper, and more dramatic moguls down the right-hand side of the rough on number 14, with the addition of native grasses, some palms and oaks as well to make a miss on the right far more dramatic down the right-hand side of number 14. The par 3s, there's 4 of them. 183 yards is the average distance of each of them. There's one really long one, that's number 8, that's 237 yards. The other ones, and there's one really short one, number 17. You might be familiar with that one. It's on an island, and if there's a bunch of wind, and you're my guys from like 3 years ago when they were just having a laugh, just dumping balls into the water, it could play somewhat difficult. It actually ranks as the 6th most difficult hole on the course. The other two, 181 and 187, all 4 play over par, including an 8% double or worse rate on number 17. It's also the par 3 that holds the highest birdie percentage of the par 3s as well. Scheffler had at least one par 3 birdie every round last season. And that's why this guy's good, because he birdies all the par 3s. 10 par 4s on the course, the average distance 433 yards. The 2 toughest holes on the property are the back 9 par 4s, 14, which I just mentioned, which is now even harder down the right-hand side, and number 18, both of which have a over par rate of above 30%. Make some pars there and you're going to be doing good. All 4 of Scheffler's bogeys a year ago came on 4 par 4s. 3 of those coming from holes 1 to 6, but there's a big distribution in terms of the length of these holes, although the average is 433 yards. Number 12, 4, and 6 all play under 400 yards. Then you have 7, 18, 15, 5, and 14 all play over 450 yards, and those are 4 of the most difficult 5 holes on the course. You cannot get your shots dialed in on those, and you're not at least playing them like marginally over par, if not at par. You play them under par, you're going to be golden for the week as long as you still beat up on the par 5s, but that's where you really need to make your hay. If you can figure it out on 16, 15, and 14 and not give up strokes there, you're going to be pretty good. You can birdie the easy ones in between. There is a drivable-ish par 4 that is number 12. It has a birdie rate of around 27%. It's 369 yards. Guys were having issues, specifically Brian Harman, who I really needed to make birdie on that hole a year ago. Some guys are going to go for it. There's a lot of layups depending on where the pin position is that day. There is water down the left-hand side as well. Just something of note that some guys will be taking a rip on it. The other guys will hit an iron. Just it's a really slanted green from right to left that goes towards the water. So it actually does make a pretty difficult mid-range chip shot from like 50 yards, especially if you get caught up in the rough on the right-hand side. It's hard to stop the ball on that green, and then you end up shorting yourself because you do not want to risk going over the pin and it potentially rolling into the water down on that shaved-off area on the other side. It's akin to another Pete Dye course at the Travelers. I believe it's number 13, maybe it's number 16, where guys take aim at it, but if you fly the green, you end up going into the water if you can cut it that much. The par 5s are the most essential on this course. You need to be taking dead aim. If you're not beating up on the par 5s, you basically have no chance of winning this tournament. 4 of the 5 easiest holes on the course are par 5s. Number 16 has a 49% under par rate, including a 3.6% eagle rate. Number 2 has a 2% eagle rate, as does number 11. Scheffler birdied 16 in all 4 rounds a year ago, had multiple birdies on the par 5s in all 4 rounds as well. That's how you tread your water. If you're going to give up strokes anywhere, be it on one of those more difficult par 4s or the difficult par 3s, you need to be able to make them back on the par 5s. If you can get number 9, 2 of the 4 rounds, that should set you well ahead. It is the most difficult of the par 5s at only a 30% birdie rate, but it's one that you're not really going to see many eagles on this year. Plus, it's been extended a little bit from 602 up to 610 yards, depending on where the tee boxes are that day. So just don't anticipate many players getting there in 2. In fact, you're going to see a lot of players in one of those like little mini pot bunkers just to the right of the green where all of the mounds are. And depending on where the pin is, it's going to be a pretty easy up and down from that context. A friendly reminder that there are 3 amazing contests on Underdog right now for best ball golf drafts, all starting at the Masters, the Albatross, the Scramble Returns, and the Big Albatross. $500K, $250K, and $200K prize pools for each of those tournaments. And if you wait a week or so, you're going to see 2 more pop up in the Pat Mayo Experience drafts, one for majors only and one from the Masters until the British Open. So there are 2 great ones, and those ones are going to be rake free. What you need to do in order to draft as many teams as possible, along with just watching the content, because I'll have strategy shows for all of this stuff, is use code Mayo at Underdog right now and get yourself a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. The best part is you can use those bonus funds to do your drafts, then you can use the rest of it for pick'em, and you'll get a free pick for the Players Championship this week. Code Mayo at Underdog right now, okay? Those contests are legit, by the way, and use those bonus funds when you use code Mayo to go enter them. Hopefully, the Pat Mayo Experience Rake-Free contest, which I think are $25 10 max with a big guaranteed prize pool, especially if more of you sign up with code Mayo right now, should be available hopefully midway through this week, and maybe we can do some on the Cut Sweat live show as we're watching the golf, but hopefully this week, probably the week after, to get everyone ready for major season. But we should have custom contests for both, just the majors, and then from the Masters all the way into the Open Championship. I do want to look at the scorecard as we head over to fantasynational.com. Again, fantasynational.com/Mayo. Get you 20% off, and you're going to want it this week, especially if you're playing DraftKings Showdown. Just by taking a glance at the scorecard and how these holes play, it's not a substantial advantage because you need guys to actually take advantage of it. There's going to be an influx of casual players for this event, so it's a good time to leverage this angle. Number 18 is the most difficult hole on the course. You're 2.5 times more likely to bogey it than birdie it, and making back to front a pretty tough sell if your guys are starting on number 10 for showdown purposes. Holes number 1 and 2, they're gettable. So maybe if you can sneak out one, if you birdie 17, the sixth toughest hole, and then you can sneak out a birdie on 18, you have a pretty good chance at number 1 and 2. Number 2 is almost 40% birdie rate. Number 1 is a 15% birdie rate. But if you just play it the other way, and you can go through 8, 9, 10, 11 by starting on hole 1 in Showdown, you do have a chance to pile up that ever so valuable birdie streak. I know that these things seem very minuscule when you're thinking about it off the hop, but when you take a look at number 8, number 8's very tough. It's the third most difficult hole on the course, only an 8% birdie rate. But here's where it gets different. Number 9 is a par 5 that I already mentioned. It is the most difficult of the par 5s, but the field is still making birdie or better at over a 30% clip. So you get that one if you start on the front to really wind yourself into this. Number 10 is the 8th most difficult hole, but it still has a birdie rate of 15.5%. Juxtapose that with the 10% birdie rate at number 18, and then all the other holes that surround it. So if you can be one of the guys in the field that birdies this hole 15% of the time, you then have another par 5 coming up that has almost a 40% birdie or better rate. So if you can get number 10, it's sandwiched by par 5s if you start on the first tee, which is probably something that you're going to want to do if you're playing Showdown. And I do think that the prize pools on DraftKings will be juiced up a little bit more regularly than you see, because this is the first big millionaire maker contest of the season on DraftKings. Scheffler strung 3+ birdies together on holes 8 to 11 twice in 2023, by the way, and he birdied hole number 9 in every round, hole 8 twice, hole 10 twice, and hole number 11 twice. That's really why he won, because he just beat up on those holes. But you need other players to be able to do that at the same time as we go through it. The course itself, listen, it's an approach style course. I'll have the full details in my newsletter post coming out, but it shouldn't be shocking to hear that you're going to have guys who are really good on approach who win this tournament. As we can see, that's for the top 10 on the screen right now. They average just over a stroke per round on approach. We get inside the top 5. That number goes up to 1.23 strokes on approach. And then when we take a look at the winners, it goes up to 1.4 strokes on approach. Keep the ball in the fairway. Hit your irons well, especially it's funny, your longer irons and then like 125 and in. That mid-range, you don't get a ton of that. You get a lot of long approaches because that's how you beat up on the par 5s. Make your putts around the green. Just don't lose a bunch of strokes. You don't have to gain a bunch of strokes. And if you're not gaining a bunch of strokes around the green, that probably means you're gaining more on approach. But just to take a look back at it, a year ago, Scheffler won 6.4 strokes on approach. That was 7th. The year before that, 7.6 strokes on approach. That was 4th. Cam Smith was 5th the year that he won at 6.7. Justin Thomas was 5th in 2021 when he won. Rory was 6th. So no one outside the top 10 in any of the years that Sawgrass and the Players has moved to March has been outside the top 10 in strokes gained approach for that week. And then you have all of the lead-in form that you probably want people who are playing well coming in. I know that seems like very rudimentary, but you can see here, like the par 5s, par 4s, par 3s, just don't give it away on the par 3s, beat up on the par 5s, and you'll be a lot good to go. And then just overall, the approach buckets for this tournament are pretty up and down. Like it's, 12%, 100 to 125, 125 to 150, 18%. 18%, 15%, then 22% for over 200. You are going to have to hit a lot of shots, but the most impactful ones are going to be those those savers from 125 yards and in and getting to the par fives with the 200 plus approach shots. If you can be great in those buckets, you're going to have a really good week. I already talked about the most difficult holes, the 450 to 500. There are 5 of them on the course, and we'll take a look at the historic cut line. Last year it was even, +3, even, +1, the past 4 years at Sawgrass. Top 65 in ties make the cut. It is like any regular PGA Tour tournament. 144 players, top 65 in ties, end up making it through. Driving accuracy is about on par with normal averages on tour at 62%. Greens and regulation a little bit lower. The average is around 66%. This is around 63%. Scrambling a little bit lower as well, but a lot of that is dictated due to the water, honestly. Like if you hit it into the water, well, all of a sudden you're scrambling, but you might be scrambling from 200 yards out. Those are very difficult to convert. More 3-putts per round than normal, which is really strange considering they're super small greens, so watch out. Especially, there's one year in particular, it was the year that Jason Day won in 2016. I remember Ken Duke had this amazing round on the Saturday, but I don't know what they did to the greens that day. I've never seen greens faster. It was like putting on a sheet of glass. It was just impossible, and guys were exploding all over the place everywhere, and somehow Ken Duke was the one who was able to do it that day. He was not able to close it out because Jason Day was going to do it. Kevin Chappell was up there too when we used to have the Jason Day, Kevin Chappell corollary, but he has since, retired from being in the public light. You don't see much from old Kevin Chappell these days. Average driving distance is twofold. It's a lot like this week at Bay Hill. You don't have to hit driver off the tee here at all if you don't want to, but 278.8 driving distance and 284 per your average tour event. But you do have to remember that some drives are going to go in the water, and if they only clear 100 yards, well, that's only a 100-yard drive. So there is a bit of an impact off the tee for things like that. But the one round that always sticks out in the back of my head is the Bryson round. And it was like full on Bryson trying to drive number 6 at Bay Hill, like that era of Bryson on tour. He got to the Players the next week. He ended up coming second or third to Justin Thomas that year. But I don't think he hit driver outside of the par fives at all during the week. He was just dinking and dunking everything. He was just keeping it dry and making sure that his iron play was top notch. Just keep it dry off the tee, keep it in the short grass off the tee, and you're going to have a very high likelihood of competing at this course as long as you continue to make your putts. The average green in regulation proximity is a little bit lower than normal. When we come back, I will tell you about the modeling and which players that you need to be looking for this week as we review some of the history at the Players' Championship as well. Stay tuned. Daylight savings came into effect March 9th, and now is the perfect time to optimize your morning routine now that more sunlight is greeting you in the morning. How is AG1 helping you shake off any lingering morning grogginess and fully embrace those brighter mornings? How does AG1 and the taste of it set the tone for a longer, productive, more energized day? Well, it's easy. You get up in the morning and you take the Pat Mayo recipe. You put in about 3/4 of a cup of water, top it off with a little orange juice, then boom, scoop of AG1, shake that up. I even put some protein powder into it too if I'm lifting that day to make sure that I hit my protein needs along with all of the extra nutrients that I'm getting into my body, and boom, my gut feels great, I got a ton of energy, and I'm ready to take on the day. When it comes to my health, I want something I can trust, and that's why I choose AG1. With science-backed ingredients and real benefits I can feel, AG1 makes it easy to support overall wellness every day. And that's why I've been partnering with AG1 for so long. And AG1 is offering new subscribers a free $76 gift when you sign up. You'll get a welcome kit, a bottle of D3K2, and 5 free travel packs in your first box. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/Mayo to get this offer. That's drinkag1/Mayo to start your new year on a healthier note. Welcome to TGL, presented by SoFi, golf's newest league. It's sharp and it's electric. 2 hours of hammer dropping, overtime force, and playoffs on the line golf with 24 of the best players from the PGA Tour. The playoffs are here Monday, March 17th. 1 seed LA versus 4 seed New York at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2 and ESPN+. Then Tuesday, March 18th, 2 seed The Bay against 3 seed Atlanta at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN and ESPN+. Tune in to catch all TGL playoff action. Keep up. It's golf. Getting on the main page of fantasynational.com/Mayo to get that 20% off. You can see again at the top, that's where you get your leaderboard access along with everything else that we have going on. We're going to use the tournament history rule to walk you through what has happened at the Players' Championship over the years. Obviously, Scotty became the first back-to-back winner of the Players' Championship a year ago, one of the few players with multiple Players' Championships to his credit. And we think about his lead-in form coming in a year ago. Scheffler won the week previous at Bay Hill a year ago and had top 10 finishes in 5 of his 6 starts to begin the year, and he had won and come T55 at the Players' Championship before that. Wyndham Clark also had a very nice run at Bay Hill the week before. Can't really remember what Matt Fitzpatrick was up to that week. Harman, I think, was actually pretty good too. Just funny that the winner recent form all turns out to be really good. Scheffler wins in 2023. He did not win at Bay Hill the week before that, but he did have a win and a top 12 finish in all of his 5 starts previous to the Players. Now, previous to that, T55 and cut in his first 2 appearances at the Players. Some guys take a little bit of an adjustment time. Other guys can jump right in. But again, a very strong lead-in form for him coming into the Players' Championship. Now, in 2022, you'll see at the top, the only guy in this field who finished inside the top 5 was Keegan Bradley, who was still around. This was the big, crazy weather year where they didn't complete the first round until midway through Saturday. This was just an absolute gong show of a Players' Championship. Cam Smith won that year, but he was top 15 in 4 of his 6 events prior to his win. He was 17th and 56th at the Players previous to that. 2021, Justin Thomas was the winner, Bryson in second, Brian Harman in third. Justin Thomas was top 15 in 8 of his 9 events prior to his win. He had been T35 and T11 at the Players' Championship in the 2 years preceding that. The year before that, the first time it was held in March, Rory McIlroy won over Johnny Vegas. Jim Furyk was actually second that year. Fleetwood was inside the top 5, and he was top 6 in 5 straight events going into the tournament. So the top-end players who have been in great form coming in tend to end up winning at Sawgrass. Now, is that going to hold true every single year? I mean, it's not. Eventually, you're going to have some sort of weird outlier, like when Si Woo won in 2017. His best finish was a T22 at Bay Hill the week before, and he had just WD'd and miscuts the entire season. But he's Si Woo, and that's like what you expect when things come from him. The best players at this tournament over the past 5 years: Harman, Scheffler, Hideki, Si Woo, Kim, and that's even without his win, and a WD in between there. Tommy Fleetwood, Shane Lowry. There are very few guys with all green scorecards going through. Guys are just randomly going to miss the cut here, and you have to hope to avoid those landmines. Tom Hoagie is shockingly high on this. He had a top 3 2 years ago in 2023. He was one of the most owned players on DraftKings a year ago. In fact, he was the second most, third most. He was the second most owned. No, sorry, that was 2 years ago. He was the second most owned. He was not up there last year. He was, third last year in ownership at 17.3% in the big $25 tournament, and he came T54. Like, it's never really great. The chalk at this tournament has done better each of the past 2 years on DraftKings. I mean, Scheffler being chalky each of those years and him winning certainly helps that. Last year, Brian Harman was inside the top 10. He was 6th in ownership a year ago. Hideki was 10th in ownership. But some of the other guys that were up there, like Zalatoris was the second most owned guy last year, missed the cut. And that was at $9,900. Justin Thomas was 10-6. He missed the cut. Sam Burns, he was 7th most owned, he was T45. Max Homa was 9,600. He was 9th most owned. He was T64. 3 of the guys inside the top 10 in ownership finished inside the top 10. I'm not saying fade everyone who's chalky, but you do want to pick your spots and make a critical decision to fade some of these guys. Because honest to God, when we take a look at the salaries this year, and it's funny because I think I used this exact same example last year. Shane Lowry, depending on how he ends up finishing at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, is likely to be pretty popular. He's made 4 straight cuts at the Players. He has a top 10 in 2021, top 20s 3 of the past 4 years, and it's looking like he could win or finish inside the top 5 of API. He's going to be super highly owned coming into this, and more than likely. And is he substantially different, honestly, than Sam Burns in terms of what their outlook is for the week? Yeah, I would like Shane Lowry 1v1 better too. But if the ownership is going to be 6 times as much on Lowry than it is for Burns or Finau, I mean, with Hovland, who knows? But McNeely or Jordan Spieth, like if one of these guys is 5 to 6 times as owned as the other ones, I'm just going to fade him and use the other ones and hope he doesn't kill me, because we've seen too many random implosions at this course over the years just to go through with eating the chalk from that. Now, some of the chalky guys are going to be good, and you're going to have to identify who those are and push all in on them, but having some strategic fades along the way is not a bad idea whatsoever. So let's take a look at the players who are actually doing well coming into this tournament. We can go to the recent results tab on Fantasy National to figure that out. Now, as I'm recording this, the Arnold Palmer Invitational and the Puerto Rico Open and Live Hong Kong are not finished as of yet, so obviously this will update as we go through it, but let's just take a look at the players who are doing the best right now. Michael Kim has the most strokes gained over this time. Michael Kim is very intriguing. He's $5,900. He's playing well enough again, at least into round 3 at Bay Hill. Obviously, he's a friend of the show. I'll probably be betting Michael Kim to win, but his results kind of line up with everything that I talked about with those winner form. There will be the 6th consecutive week that he has played, but T2, T13, T13, T16, 4 straight top 20s. He's currently inside the top 20 again at Bay Hill, and Sawgrass actually makes a lot of sense for him in terms of what his skill set is. Like, I'm shocked he did so well at Torrey Pines and is doing so well at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. That extra distance and that the chipping lessons that he's been getting from Joe Mayo have really been working out. I'm shocked Victor Hovland stopped going to Joe Mayo over time. But we can see the Players' Championship, it has not been a good run for our pal Mike Kim. Now, he had played at 17, 18, and 19. His best finish was 60th, missed the cut twice. He got back into the Players a year ago and missed the cut last year. But he does really seem to be a much different player at this point. And he's going to be pretty popular at his price tag of $5,900 on DraftKings. Jake Knapp is also down at $5,900, and he has some pretty good form coming in. He didn't get into the Bay Hill field, but his 3 starts previous, all inside the top 25. Now, top-end players, Scotty looks like he's going to finish at least top 10 again at API. That would give him 4 consecutive top 25 finishes, including 2 top 10s, maybe even 3 and 4 starts since he returned from injury. Of course, Scotty Scheffler should be the favorite here. McNeely, before his second round, 81, I think, although he did, God bless Mav McNeely's heart. Code Mayo on Underdog if you want to get in on the pick'em game, but I used Mav McNeely in round 2 higher than 3.5 birdies. He shot 80, but still had 4 birdies during the round. So a real hero for me is Mav McNeely. Bhatia was playing some great golf until he wasn't, and it's really difficult to parse. That's why sometimes you see 4 of 6 top 15s or 5 of 7 top 20s when I started reading out some of those that Bhatia got caught in that very early wave, he and Pendrith, who I had bet early in the week. Although I wrote up and said on the show last week, do not make any bets before you see the tee times, but I did anyway. And Bhatia got caught in that terrible win day 1, and he was like +7, and that was just the end of him. So sometimes it happens. And sometimes you play poorly along at the same time, too. So he'll have 2 top 10s in his previous 3 starts coming in. JJ Spawn would not necessarily qualify for that. Daniel Berger would, however. Daniel Berger's 9,600 on DraftKings, which just seems like a bizarre mispricing. Not that he shouldn't be that high, depending based on how he is coming in, but he is more than Russell Henley, Wyndham Clark, Sam Burns, Shane Lowry. I like him this week. He has a 2nd, 12th, 25th, and he'll probably end up with another top 10, top 15 at Bay Hill this week coming into play. It's just really interesting that he is at that price point. People are loving old Danny Bergs. How's your burger? Well. Not even medium well, just well right now coming into action. So Scheffler, he would fit the boxes. Obviously, Rory would fit the box because he has the Dubai top 10 along with a 1st and a 17th and is contending again. So his form is great. Xander really has no form to speak of. You can't really bet Xander. And maybe he ends up getting pushed down the betting board to like 25-1 and you might be intrigued, but he looked okay for the front 9 on Friday at API. It is not looking good on Saturday. He's like last of all guys that have made the cut. Not to say that he can't flick the switch and have it go again come Players' Championship, but he just doesn't fit any of the criteria. And if we're going to whittle it down, that's going to be the most essential thing. Morikawa, he's in contention to win. That would give him 4 starts, all elevated events so far in 2025, and he would finish at least top 17 in all of them. Now, they are smaller fields. They are easier to come high, but he was runner-up at Century. He's in the mix right now. He's first tee to green of all players going into the Saturday round. T17 at Genesis, T17 at the AT&T Pro-Am. The Players always felt like the course for him to do really well, and he's had some hot starts. He was the first-round leader in 2023, ended up coming in 13th. I remember very vividly because I bet him that week. But he he goes off the rails as we get into it, but he's like one of the most accurate players in the field. That's a big plus because he can hit driver on every single hole and be way more accurate than the other guys that are hitting driver. And we know how good his irons are. His around the green game has been fine. He loses on average 2 strokes putting per start at the Players' Championship until he can figure that out. And maybe he has. We go and take a look at his putting splits. For his career, he's minus 0.5 per event for his career. But over his last 10, 2.1 in the positive, 1.2 in the positive over his last 5. And just take a look. Plus 2.7, 4.4, 2.7, 2.7, plus 4, plus 4, plus 3. The only 2 big ones in there at the BMW Championship, he lost 3 strokes putting, and he lost a stroke at the AT&T Pro-Am between Spyglass and Pebble Beach. Those are difficult putting tracks, but overall, he has been really good. Obviously, Bermuda has not been his jam over the years, but it's not like he hasn't won on Bermuda grass either. The WGC Mexico in 2021 wasn't actually contested in Mexico. It was contested at the Concession Club in Florida on Bermuda, where he had a pretty good putting week that week. You can see he gained 4 on the field that time around. His best putting performances ever. They don't normally come on Bermuda. I guess Century counts as Bermuda, but it's not the same sort of Bermuda as you're going to find in Florida. Even if it is the overseed, it's just not going to be that similar to the very slow greens that you see at Kapalua year over year. But, bent grass and POA have been his preferred putting surfaces, but it's not like he can't spike on Bermuda. But that would be the one limitation holding him back coming in. Obviously, Ludwig had the win. He's going to contend again at Bay Hill. But he doesn't have the whole dearth. He has a dearth of overall results for the top of the season. Thomas continues to play well, T6, T9, and probably another T10, 3 straight T10s coming into it. Cantlay is a bit of a mixed bag. He played himself out of it on Friday a little bit coming in, but you can see he had a 15th, 5th. He could probably still sneak inside the top 15 again. That would give him 4 top 15s in 5 starts. The only reason I'm going through these is I'm trying to identify the winner. Who could possibly fit that criteria? And it's most of the guys at the top of the board. They're having a really good run. In fact, it's like Hideki, who really isn't doing all that much. He had the win to start the year, and that's really been all he's been doing. He just doesn't have another top 10 since. Berger obviously fits the criteria. Russell Henley probably fits the criteria coming in as well. He was T6 at Cognizant last week. He was 5th at the AT&T Pro-Am. He is up at the leaderboard at Bay Hill. He was 10th at the Sony Open, so he would normally have it. I don't understand how, this is his tournament. If there's a major or a career-defining moment for Russell Henley, it would be the Players' Championship. He plays well at Pete Dye courses. It's a shorter course. It's all irons, and he putts great on Bermuda. You can see spike Bermuda putter. He's a minus putter on POA and bent, and he gains 0.3 strokes per tournament in the positive on Bermuda grass. He plays all difficulties well. He plays all wind well. All the things that come into play at TPC Sawgrass, and he doesn't have a top 10. He's been playing in this tournament since 2013. It's really bizarre. You should like Russell Henley this week. I like Russell Henley this week, but you start to look at him and be like, what is going on with Russell Henley at Sawgrass? Is there something about this course that just does not fit his eye? And it's not like he's been absent of any success over the years. He missed the cut a year ago as one of the higher-owned guys, as I mentioned earlier, but the 2 years previous, T19, T13, it's not cash an outright winner check for you, but it's better than the 3 years previous when he missed the cut each and every time. So it's very difficult to grasp what is happening with him, why this is happening to him, but there's obviously something off. Listen, I'm not going to bet Russell Henley at 45 or 50 to 1. I'll have as Jeff likes to say, I have my own losers that I like to bet in that neighborhood. Seb Straka is going to be the guy that I bet, honestly, from that range, and hopefully I can still grab the 60 that's on him right now. That was the one bet that I gave away on the intro show that I did with Cam and Ian. If you want to have a laugh, watch that show. We do hit on some pertinent information for Sawgrass, but a lot of it is just Cam trying to figure out which of the 20 guys from beyond 100 to 1 that he wants to guess. And again, if you give me your guy from beyond 100 to 1 that you are thinking about betting or has a chance to win this week, leave that in the comment section. While you smash the like right now and sub to Mayo Media Network, that gets you in that draw for $500 cash, straight cash, homie, if you want to do that one, and a year free of fantasynational.com. You can do the same thing on the audio feeds. Apple Podcast, you sub, you leave a 5-star review and give me that winner in there of the guy from beyond 100 to 1. Do the same thing on Spotify for this episode. While you subscribe on Spotify, and you can get 3 ballots into that draw. I'll be giving away the winner on that live show, I think, Wednesday morning. I might do a live on Wednesday evening as well, and that's when I might give it out. But this is what we're dealing with right now. If you want to get your hands on some free cash, take the 5 seconds and go do those reviews for me. Helps out the show tremendously, especially in a week like this. I'm going to have the article in the newsletter, Substack, Mayo Media. You can subscribe to that for free. That's also where you're going to get first crack at tickets for the PME live show, June 7th in Toronto, if you want to come to that. But I'll also be posting my article on Twitter as well. I'll have it pinned to the top of my profile. If you see it up there, please, can you share it around, hit retweet, hit like on it, respond to it, engage with it, because I want to get a lot of information out there this week. Players, Masters, and PGA Championship. Honestly, those are the three biggest weeks for me outside of football to gain some new people to the show. So if you can tell a friend, share it around, do what you can, help support the Pat Mayo experience, I would be very appreciative of that. And that's why I'm giving away $500. So if you can help me out, you know what? If you retweet any of my articles on Twitter this week, you get a ballot for doing that. Each time you do it. I'm throwing that out there. You know what? I might make that a separate draw. Might give away $200 for that one. So $500 for the YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. $200 to any generous person out there who can lend me their credibility on their X account to share around the shows, share around the tournament articles, and I'll pick one lucky person to win $200 from that as well. And I'll be giving that out this week too. There. An instant giveaway on the draw just for you good people. Use code Mayo at Underdog too, because that's also very helpful when it comes down to it. Lowry fits the criteria, as does Mav McNeely. Doesn't, but he does have 2 top 10s in his past 3 starts. Didn't make the cut this week. Not very good, pal. Straka is the interesting one. So I'm betting him. He's 8,600. I'm playing him on DraftKings. I assume that he's going to be very popular. Obviously, he has a win on Bermuda grass, but so far this season, in 11th, 15th, 7th, and 1st, and he was 30th and 15th at the Sony. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top 15s in 7 starts, and he might make it 6 with his performance at Bay Hill. He's playing a ton of golf. The approach play has been off the charts good. He's hitting a ton of fairways, gaining. It is the putting that's going to be the issue for him. Will he putt himself out of this tournament? And the answer is probably yes, because I'm going to be betting on him, and he'll probably miss the cut. But at the Players' Championship, 2 good runs, 2 of the past 3 years, 16th a year ago, 9th the year before that in that waterlogged year. That's the only year that he's gained on these greens, but it just takes 1 year and rolling it hot and catching the right eye for Seb Straka to come through. But he is the one from down the list a little bit that does pop out, honestly, in my mind, of guys that fit this criteria of a winning portfolio. And he's won at a Pete Dye course. He just did that at the Stadium course at the American Express. So he has not won a big boy tournament in his career. This would be a big step up. I've also bet a future on him at 110-1 for the Open Championship. That's at coolbet.com right now. If you're in Canada and live outside in Ontario and want to play that, that's up there. It's also at Bet365 at 110-1 as well. But he has all the check marks clicked, and when we get to the modeling, you're going to see his name pop up a ton. Weirdly, Spieth is kind of in this too. He has 2 top 10s in his past 3 starts. It's difficult to trust old Jordo, but it'd be a lot of fun if Jordan could get into the mix for this event. Minwoo was runner-up 2 years ago to Scotty Scheffler. I'm trying to see how Minwoo is currently doing. I can't remember if he made the cut or not. He did not make the cut at the API, but previous to that, he had 3 top 20s in 4 starts. Obviously, it's going to be difficult for him to keep the ball in play, but if he does, we know his irons are never really that good, but he can spike putting at any moment, and we saw that at the Players when he contended. He ended up coming T6. He was in the final group with Scheffler, despite losing 6 strokes on approach. That's always the drawback of Minwoo with any of these events. You can just see his player profile page. Just a lot of red and big negative reds on the strokes gained approach facet. Now, if he can just be like he was at Pebble Beach or even Cognizant, 2 shorter courses, which does bode well for his iron game coming in. I know it's juiced up to 7,300 yards now, but it still is one of the more shorter courses that you'll see. Like, it's not Phoenix, it's not Torrey Pines, and he was able to gain at Pebble and even PGA National, which is more, PGA National being a par 71 is more in tune with the length of this course. And if he's going to be able to gain on the greens, he's obviously almost always going to be able to do it off the tee. As long as he keeps the ball in play, he has that extra distance. He should beat up on the par 5s. He's a very intriguing player this week from down the board a little bit because, again, he does have those finishes that go along with it. Other than that, like Nick Taylor should theoretically be really good at the Players based on his profile of where he's won in the past, the corollary courses that go along with it, but I just don't ever, and his approach play has been off the charts good. He is not really holding up his end of the bargain at API, but it's not like he's a disaster either. He did make the cut. He has one top 20 in 7 appearances at the Players Championship in his career, although he gained 3.6 strokes on approach a year ago in 2021 and 2019, both during the March season, 8.2 and 4.8 on approach. If he could just make some putts, the issue becomes that normally he can be a pretty accurate driver, but he starts wobbling a little bit. 2 things I actually noticed watching API was Xander had a big case of missing it right all the time, and Scotty, at least for the first round in a bit, was missing everything left. So just keep that in mind going through. I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem, but Scheffler doesn't look as invincible as he did coming into each of the last 2 years into this event. He still looks very good. And it just flips on him just in a moment, and all of a sudden it's over for the rest of the field. But I just thought that was somewhat intriguing. Akshay does somewhat fit the criteria. He's $7,000. I would expect him to not be as popular as you would think, mainly because he had a really bad week at API. Of course, I'm going to bet Akshay, but that's me. That's what I do like every single week. He's like my guy. He's like my new Siwoo. Ben Griffin does have the 2 top 5 finishes before heading to Bay Hill, so he should be somewhat popular at 6,700. And now these are the guys that are outside of that 100 to 1 range by and large when you're looking at it. There's not a lot to love down here. Like I said, Michael Kim and Jake Knapp would both fit the criteria. Novak might fit the criteria as well at 5,700. That's actually a shout that Cam really liked, and I don't think that Andrew Novak can win, but if you're thinking about like a top 10, top 20, or a play at $5,700, I can almost assure you Michael Kim and Andrew Novak are going to be the 2 that people go to. Nikolai Højgaard's somewhat interesting. I know I say that every week, but he is. He was great on approach at the Wampo in Phoenix. He was 8th in Mexico, T18 after a bit of a hiccup at the Cognizant, but still pretty good. Putts very poorly on Bermuda, but he doesn't have a long sample size. Did gain 3.5 strokes putting that week, and if he can just keep the ball in play, which is a real big ask for Nikolai Højgaard, the approach play's been really good so far in 2025. He has not dipped below 3.3 gained on approach in any of the first 3 tournaments he's played. He's gained 3.5 in 2 of the 3 as well. It just comes down to, can he keep the ball in play? And sometimes that's a little bit more difficult. He's more of a spray and pray kind of guy, and he was bad at this tournament last year. It was his first appearance at Sawgrass. I would not hold that particularly against him. I know that a lot more people are going to enjoy Rasmus Højgaard this week, but if we just go in and take a look at his fairways, it's not great, Bob. Fairways, he did gain at the Cognizant, which is nice to see because that's a course that has a ton of water. And sometimes it is difficult to figure out if you are not necessarily intentionally trying to hit the fairway. Of course, you're always trying to hit the fairway, but it's encouraging to see that his distance went down a little bit, but his fairways went up at a course that has prevalent water, whereas you go to Mexico, which is just hit it wherever, and you're going to be fine as long as you don't hit it out of bounds. You don't have to rely on hitting a ton of fairways at Mexico. You just want to drive it as far as possible. And what did he do? He gained a bunch of distance on the field that week. In Phoenix, it's a bit of a mismatch because you can miss a lot of fairways at Phoenix and be absolutely fine as long as you're not stuck behind a cactus, and that seemed to be what he did, despite the T36, because overall it was not a great week for him, but he lost in accuracy, gained on distance, but he was still high in good drives gained, and that's what we've seen. Even when he is missing the fairway, he's still hitting greens in regulation versus the field. So good drives gained, he's done that, and greens in regulation he's gained. You just have to hope that he doesn't absolutely implode, and dude loves to get wet. Angel dust, PCP, that is Nicholas Højgaard. Dude enjoys taking a dip from time to time. He should be sponsored by Skoal. That's how much he enjoys taking a dip. You can get Jason Duffner off that because he's not playing. You give it to Nikolai Højgaard. You know the Scandinavians love their snuff anyway, so boom, get Skoal. Or maybe some, what's the other one they used to have? Totally forget. I was going to say it's wintergreen, but that's most obviously not it. The original pouch. Just get the guy a Zinn sponsorship at this point. Other than him, Kevin Yu's been playing okay golf, but no one really fits the criteria outside of Patrick Rogers. If he has another good week, that would be, if he finishes inside the top 25, it would be 5 top 25 finishes in 6 starts. That's not like a winner type portfolio, but not bad at the same time either. Gim comes in with a just outside of a, has a top 15 at the Cognizant. Obviously, he's played really well at the players over the years. Adam Hadwin is another one, is actually playing a little bit better at API, better than you would expect. And he's someone that I've just always liked at the Players Championship over the years. Missed the cut a year ago, but T13 and T9 going into the 2 years previous to that. He just really hasn't had it going on. He was top 10 in Phoenix. That's nice to see, but some disastrous performances from him so far this season. Time to build out a model for the Players Championship, which I have already done, so make that easy on ourselves. So here's what we're looking at. All this information will be in that newsletter and Twitter post, again, if you're looking for how the ratings actually go out. But strokes gained approach, 16%, along with opportunities gained, which is a birdie or eagle opportunity that is inside 15 feet, so that's also an approach number. So I'm putting those two together at a combined weight of 27% in the overall model. It's approach and opportunities gained. Fairways gained at 10, that's accuracy. Approach from 200 yards plus is 9%. So now we're up to almost 35% to 40% of approach numbers, taking up this modeling. Putting 5 to 10, 10 to 15 feet. The short par fours at 7%, 350 to 400. You can make up some bones on those ones, do your scoring on them, and then the par fours, 450 to 500 yards, weighted at 17%. Very difficult holes. Birdies are better gained overall at 7%. Tee to green overall at 14%. And we can backtest this too. So here's what we got for the past 24 rounds. Seb Straka, number 1. Nick Taylor, number 2. Interesting first two names on this list. You can see Straka, 5th in approach over that period, 1st in opportunities gained, 1st in birdies or better gained, 4th tee to green. The only thing he sucks at is putting. 66th and 73rd in this field. It's not a disaster. That's right around field average of 144 players. But overall, everything else that he does is really good, including hitting a ton of fairways. Ditto for Nick Taylor, 8th in approach, only 44th in opportunities gained. But you know, if Nick Taylor gets into contention, dude's an absolute killer. So I wouldn't hate a Straka and Nick Taylor bet if you're going like 65 to 1, 125 to 1, and that's how you want to build out the back end of your card, and then try to focus on the top. Because after that, number 3 on the list, Thomas Scheffler. Hauser-Berger at number 5. Henley, Joel Damon, who's 5,100 on DraftKings and like 250 to 1, is number 7 on this list. If he could putt, he'd be dangerous, but he can't. Xander is still number 8, but his stats go back to a year ago. McNeely, Highsmith. That's the top 10. After that, it's Kim, Lee Hodges, JJ Spawn, The Glove, Kurt Kitayama, Pendrith. Poor Pendrith. He's going to, once we get updated numbers from the API, he's going to fall down this list. Grazerman, Hoffman, Sam Stevens, Adam Scott, who is a former winner, like 2 decades ago at the Players. This was the spot of his big breakthrough, I believe, in 2001 or 2002. I vividly remember that because I'm old. Fleetwood, Smalley, Burns, Morikawa, Denny McCarthy round out the top 15. Then the next 3 have some very interesting names. Denny, Knapp, who we mentioned, Gim, who we mentioned, Michael Kim, who I've already mentioned, Patrick Cantlay, and Nikolai Højgaard, who obviously we just did a little bit of a deep dive on, come in at number 30 in the key stats. So we have to see if these are any good. You can do that on Fantasy National, by the way. I know some people just don't play around with a lot of the tools. They do what they do and go and generate their lineups. They click on their stars, they go to ownership projections, and they go to lineup generator, and that's all they do. There's actually an Underdog tool on here that, I don't talk about it enough, but you can do that. The Players Championship calculator, you choose a player that you want to put in, you put in their strokes, and you can customize it per player, and then you can see the percentages that come out on that player if you're curious and want to play more of the pick'em game on Underdog. And if you get that bonus and free pick using code Mayo up to $1,000, then you'll probably want to be using this. FantasyNational.com/Mayo gets you 20% off anyway, and you can utilize all of these things. So when we're going through with it, if you go to the top, you can change it, and you can go to the time machine. Let's go back in time to the 2013 players, which will take the stats past 24 rounds going into last year's players, and let's see how our model actually did with the results. The number 1 player in the model won. He was Scotty Scheffler. Xander was number 2 in the model, and apparently he came T19. I don't think that was the case, was it? Let's see here. What are we doing now? Oh no, I went back to the 2023 players. I want to go back to the 2024 players. I'm so old now, I'm getting my years mixed up. That ain't good. So let's see. We got model rank from last year. Okay, here's what we see. Scotty came in at number 1. He won the tournament. Hoagie was number 2, hence probably why his ownership was so high. He was T54. Hovland was 3rd, came T62. Finau was 4th, came T45. Then we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it. Lowry was 5th in the modeling, came 19th. Xander was 6th, came in 2nd. Morikawa came 45th. Connors came 13th. Rai came 35th. And Ludwig came 8th. That's pretty good. Gim was actually, this is interesting, Gim was 13th and came 16th. And Wyndham Clark was 14th and came in 2nd. So of the players inside the top 14 of the modeling a year ago, only 2 of them missed the cut. That was Mathieu Pavon and Justin Thomas. Then it gets a little bit wonkier the more you go down, although Hideki 6th into 20th in the modeling, 6th overall. Noren was 23rd, came 19th. Rory was 24th, came 19th. So I would say this is a pretty successful model if that's how we did it out past 24 rounds a year ago. You can play around with this too and go like past 50 rounds coming in to see if that gives you better results or worse results, so you can tweak those around to actually play around with your modeling going into it. So you can see if you go past 50 rounds, it just gave you kind of the best players overall. Although, see, Eric Cole ended up really highly. He missed the cut. So did Glover and Cantley. They both missed the cut. They were 7th, 9th, and 11th in the modeling. Other than that, you had Aberg was 8th, came 8th. Ryan Morikawa came 35th and 45th. Hovland obviously came 62nd. Then you had Scheffler who won, Xander who came 2nd. And then so you had 3 guys inside the top 10 who were inside the top 10 of the modeling. But the next few guys did really well. Lowry, Hoagie, Gim, Connors, Wyndham Clark, and Hideki. Even Bezadenhout long-term came 19th, and he ended up coming 13th in the Players' Championship last year. So that's that. I find that this stuff is really intriguing if you go back and look at it. We'll separate by past 36 rounds to see how it did, and hopefully it did a little bit better. We try to find the sweet spot with some of this stuff. And maybe it's just pure recent form coming in. Maybe we go to 12 rounds and try to figure it out. So not as successful, but everyone inside the top 9 made the cut last year, but we only had 2 top 10s of the top 9. That was Oberg, and Scotty, who comes in. No matter how many ways you parse this, Scotty ends up coming in at number 1. If we go super short term from last year and go to 12 rounds, let's see if that did anything different. Not really. Each of the top 6 end up making the cut. Knapp ended up getting thrust into there after his win in Mexico a year ago. Gim ended up 5th. But overall, like, not bad considering some of the names that are up here, like Akshay, Novak, Zalatoris, Hideki, Valimaki, Clark, all end up. So you have 2 more guys inside the top 10. Stricker rated out really well because he doesn't play very many events. So you're just picking and choosing from some of the events that he had played previously. But outside of that, from like 15 down to 20, did pretty well with a 13th and an 8th in there. So I do think that 24 is probably the sweet spot, and that takes into consideration almost all of the season played so far, with the exception of someone like Laurie Cantor, who's only playing on DP because those numbers are not finagled into this, and someone like Xander, who just simply missed a lot of time. So that's what happened last year. So I'd say backtesting pretty well went for it. Let's see the 2023 time machine for the Players' Championship. 2020 is just going to be, 22 is just going to be very difficult because that was the wonky weather year. So this one actually did great. So Rahm was a big bust. He was number 3 in the modeling, and he came like dead last. He was 144th in the field. And Rory was a big busto that year as well. He was 5th in the modeling, and he came 98th. But other than that, Scotty won. He was number 1. Xander was 2nd. He was 19th. Homo was 4th. He came in 6th. Finau was 6th. Came in 19th. Cantley 7th. T19. Hoagie was 8th. Came in 3rd. Victor was 9th. Came in 3rd. Colin was 10th. Came in 13th. Cam Young, per usual, sucked. He was T51 in 11th. Zalatoris missed the cut at 12. Chris Kirk missed the cut at 15th. That was the year that Chris Kirk won the Cognizant, so he got pushed up. But the other guys from that 20 and in, you had Siwoo, 27th. Tom Kim, 51st. Sam Ryder, 44th. Wyndham Clark, 27th. Sung Jae, 6th. Jason Day, 19th. And Ricky Fowler at 13th. That's a pretty good hit rate for the past 24 rounds going into the lead-in for the 2023 Players' Championships. Now that we've gone through that, I do feel a little bit better about my modeling for the past 24 rounds for this tournament. So once again, the outlier names, Sepp and Nick Taylor, 1 and 2. Can't wait for that to blow up in my face. Berger is high up there, as is Joel Damon, Joe Highsmith, Siwoo, Hodges, Spahn, Glover, Kitayama. It's almost devoid of big names, which is shocking. The big names that are up there, Thomas, Scheffler, Russell Henley, Xander Schauffele, but we know that that's some Fugazi numbers because most of them come from last year. Other than that, it's like Fleetwood, Adam Scott. Where the hell is Rory? Like, Rory has a win so far this year. So you do want to look at it after the API comes up. Those will be the power rankings that I have in the newsletter when I put it out, so you can probably do it through there. Rory rates out 78th in the short-term modeling. I assume going at the end of last year, he was just absolutely brutal, and that's why, because he does have a win so far this year. Yeah, Tour Championship was bad. St. Jude was really bad. BMW was and just not hitting his irons well at all. Hence why when I have overweighted iron play in this, and he has had like -3s per round in opportunities gained and -2 at the Tour Championship for irons, that's really going to limit you. Plus, his putting has been absolutely atrocious coming into this week. This week, it's actually been very good at API. So those are some of the names that I'm looking at from the very top and bottom. The only money I have in so far overall is on Seb Straka, but I probably end up going to get to Nick Taylor as well. A few other things that we can look at. We can go, and I have my just strokes gained overall modeling. And this is the stuff that you can play around with when you're a member at Fantasy National, which I would highly recommend, fantasynational.com/Mayo to check this out. But there's different filters you can use on the side. You can see the best players who play in Florida and just Florida courses. You can take a look at Pete Dye, and that's what I want to do, because so you have the Pete Dye courses, and I think that there's many corollary courses if you want to go into this. I think that you have your regular rotation. Obviously, you have all these major champions. So guys that have won majors, they tend to be the good players, so they tend to play well at courses. But you have your Pete Dye tracks, but then you have your simplified Pete Dye tracks that aren't really Pete Dye tracks. They're just shorter-ish courses where the entire field is a bit more live because of wedge play and putting. I would throw the Sony Open into that, and I think the Wyndham Championship probably has the biggest crossover with most of these, because we've just seen a lot of Wyndham Championship winners do really well at the Players' Championships over the years, like be it Webb Simpson, who has a win, Henrik Stenson has won both. There's more to this list that I'm just forgetting at this point. Aaron Rai was the winner at the Wyndham Championship a year ago. Phoenix is another one to look at. You had Hideki, you had Webb. Both of those have, Custa said it for so long that I have it in my mind that Hideki has actually won the Players, which he has not. By the way, just continue to remember that. Scheffler has obviously won both. I think he won both twice. Webb Simpson has won somewhat recently at both. They have similar putting surfaces. That's where I would go with that. But if you did want to make a Heritage, Sony, Wyndham, Colonial, that's sort of the faux Pete Dye swing type tournaments that you can look at. That's another angle that you can take. But just looking at this right now in terms of just the Pete Dye numbers. We have the Pete Dye filter clicked on, and we'll go 2025. 2024, and 2023. So we'll take a look at the past 2.5 years of results at Pete Dye courses and limit those to the past 24 rounds. Take a look at scoring average and see what we got going on. Who are the best Pete Dye players out there? Well, it's probably Scotty Scheffler, because he's the best at everything. And that is true. He is number one by a pretty substantial margin over Xander Schauffele, who is at number 2, averaging 2.4 strokes per round. Scotty's over 3. So the only guys over 3 is Scotty, 1, and there are 4 guys over 2 strokes per round. Xander, Brian Harmon, Matt McCarty in 1 round, and Xander Schauffele. After that, you're looking at Matty Schmidt, who's up here. Jacob Bridgman does very well at Pete Dye courses, albeit in only 4 rounds, only 8 rounds for Matty Schmidt. Justin Thomas is next. He has 24 full rounds. Wyndham Clark, Carson Young, Patrick Cantlay, Ludwig, Mac Meisner, only 3 rounds. Berger, only 3 rounds, because obviously he had been injured for so long. Smalley in 18 rounds actually does really well. Min Woo plays Pete Dye courses pretty well. So does Kevin Yu in only 10 rounds. Matt Fitzpatrick, who people want no part of, does really well at Pete Dye tracks and is a major champion. He doesn't really have like the track record or lead-in form to win, but he does have that major championship check mark and does play well at Pete Dye courses. We've seen Grazerman, only 4 rounds to go off of, but 1.19 strokes gained per start over that time, and he should have won the Wyndham Championship and then didn't win the Wyndham Championship when he made that awful quadruple bogey and Aaron Rai ended up stealing it from him. So I think that's somewhat interesting as a guy from down the board to look at. He's going to be right around that 100-1 range, $7,300 on DraftKings. Brian Campbell in only 2 rounds, Morikawa in 22, Garnett, Hisatune, Hubbard, Rory, Eckroat, Rai, Bezadenhout, Hoagie, Finau, Tom Kim. Tom Kim just seems to have lost it recently. When you celebrate a chip in that doesn't go in on TGL in front of a national audience, real bad look. Seb Straka is up there as well, and these are all positive players. Norlander, Fleetwood, Henley, Connors, Day, Hovland, Doug Gim, the Gim Reaper, Gim Chi is there as well. Now we're just like way down on the list and just naming names, just trying to give you the full context of the list. We flip it the other way, guys that are bad with over, let's say, 10 rounds to their credit, because you have like Campos, who has 1 round, and he was brutal, but it's 1 round, who cares? Nikolai Echevarria, Sam Stevens, and Peter Malnati been really bad at Pete Dye courses, as have Nick Dunlap, Billy Horschel, Davis Riley, K.H. Lee, and Jake Knapp. Overall, Ben An, Ari O, David Lipsky, JJ Spawn, Taylor Pendrith, Luke List, and Lucas Glover, Justin Lauer, Max Homa. Even though Max Homa has a top 10 at the Players' Championship, it just did not work out well for him at Pete Guy courses over time. We know that he messes around with sightlines. Some guys just can't get it. Although Henley historically plays well at die courses, as when we went through his name, he did not play all that well historically at the Players' Championship. So I hope that you were able to get something from this show in terms of research. You can see I'm really fired up for a big week of golf. I'm going live on Wednesday morning. I'll probably go live again on Wednesday night as well. If you retweet my shows or the article that comes up that'll be pinned to my profile starting on Monday afternoon, then boom, you get to a draw for $200. You sub to the channel, you smash the like, and leave me your favorite player from 100 to 1 and beyond in the comment section. You're in a draw for $500 and or a free year of Fantasy National. If you just want to get in on Fantasy National, do your own research. FantasyNational.com/Mayo. Live show, Toronto, June 7th. You save the date and you sub to the newsletter so you get first free access to the tickets. You can also do that giveaway draw for the $500 in Fantasy National if you sub to the Apple Podcast and or the Spotify podcast as well, and leave the comment in there because that tremendously helps out the show, as does Code Mayo and Underdog, to get that $1,000 bonus when you make your deposit up to, at least. All right, so I pumped all the ads in at the end so I wouldn't bore you too much. I'm looking very much forward to this week. Monday on the Pat Mayo Experience, we got Jeff and Tim Undercust joining the show to break down the players, make our bets. You're going to want to know who are the three players who are the most cursed heading into the players. I got Raza and Byron for the best bets on Tuesday. Obviously, Tambo on Wednesday. Cut Sweat Live on Friday. A ton of content coming out this week. Want to see you here. Want to see you sharing it around. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!